Great experiences build great leaders. Great leaders build great teams. This is Building Great Sales Teams.
All right, guys, I got a special one today. I got Robert Frederich with me. He's a Navy Special Operator, and he's currently working through the Honor Foundation and transitioning to the civilian workforce. This episode's really special to me because there's a few purposes behind it. You know, we have two goals with it. We're going to help our listeners understand how military training transfers to the civilian world, and then with Robert, we're going to extract some of the lessons and philosophies that Robert's gained from his extensive military career. Robert, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Thanks for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
Absolutely, brother. So we met through a mutual friend, Brenda Nekvatal, and she does work with the Honor Foundation, and she mentioned you, and she was just singing your praises, and when she started telling me about your background and everything and what you were looking for, I kind of like realized, hey, I've got a few people in my network that could use someone like that. You know what I'm saying? So she was like, do you think you have someone for that? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So she set up a call between us, and we hit it off. I think we talked for like an hour or something like that. And that's kind of how we met. And so, Robert, can you tell me what you currently do in the Navy right now?
Well, yeah, basically I'm a staff nerd, you know, a man at a keyboard, and yeah, I've elevated up to the organizational leadership level. So I do, you know, a lot of like futuristic planning, you know, engage with the various theaters globally, finding out how to address the problems they currently have, how to posture for future problems, assess the risk, the logistics behind moving people around, and I kind of just sanity check what their plans are and see if it makes sense, like what they are intending to do, and then we run it through, you know, our SMEs, our subject matter experts, take a look at it and say, you know, is this feasible? Could you do it with this many people or boats, or do you need more? Or do we even have that much in the inventory? If not, how would we get it to that? You know, that's kind of what I do now. So
you're, you know, taking some of the, I guess, grander out of it. You're an operations manager, sounds like. Basically, you
essentially, yeah,
you deploy the operation needed for whatever country or whatever embassy. I think you had said that you're working with the Department of Defense, correct?
Correct.
Okay, very cool. So, what got you into Special Forces in general? Because what you're doing now is very different than what you used to do, right? So, you know, was it like a childhood dream? Did you see a movie and were like, hey, I want to do that, I want to go be a cowboy? Or what got you into Special Forces?
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned that, because my brother just brought it up the other day. We went to boot camp together back in 2001, and it was a video. It was a recruiting video for SWIC, which is Special Warfare Boat Operators. And there's 5 special programs in the Navy. One of them is SWIC. And so each of those 5 programs got up and showed a video and talked about their communities. And what got me into this job was they just had the coolest video. It was boats coming out of, I mean, that was it. My entire decision was based off the coolest video. Is boats dropping out of planes, jumping waves, machine guns. It just looked so like high adrenaline, high energy, just exactly what I wanted. And so I, you know, they checked my aptitude scores for the Navy, and I was good. I went down to the pool and I did the swim, run, push up, sit up, pull up, and passed. And then next thing you know, I finished boot camp and they whisked me off to San Diego for training. That's nice. Kind of how it all happened. It wasn't like this. Honestly, my whole life, I thought I was going to be a Marine. I grew up watching Full Metal Jackets, and I just loved the video.
Yeah.
And it was my stepdad who was in the Navy for a few years. He actually talked me into the Navy my senior year of high school. But I don't come from a military family. It just, you know, I just knew that if I stuck around Waco, Texas too long, I was probably going to end up in jail or something stupid, and I needed to go. And then fortunately for me, 9/11 happened,
Yeah.
and being a loud, proud, flag waving Texan that I am, me and 10,000 other people were, lined up to go. So a world event kind of stimulated that plan into action.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess we're at that point now where people's enlistment in the military was triggered by that, and I guess a lot of the younger guys, that's gonna be their story too, I would imagine. So Swick, so the boats, I didn't really understand what you meant when you said, I think you said like military boats or these like, I thought you were talking about like the ships in the Navy, and they were just smaller versions of the big, naval ships you see or whatever. Yeah. And then you said, hey, go watch Act of Valor, right? And I remember that movie, but what I didn't remember about it is that it was actual SEALs and special operators that acted out the movie, right? That it wasn't actors, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and so right away when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, oh yeah, because the acting was horrible, right?
Yeah,
but it was really cool. It was really cool to see the dialect, like the real dialect that they used, and how they assess the situation. We do this program in Apex called Apex Evolution, and so that program, not only does it test you physically, but they put you through, some. I guess the very fast version of some military training and how they approach operations, And so it was kind of cool to see them actually go through that. When I watched it before, I had no idea, so it was just a movie to me before. And then you talked about those boats, and when that boat ran up on the riverbank and just freaking toasted all the enemy, it was just so cool. I was like, man, that's what Robert used to do. That's pretty freaking awesome. And so you've got some pretty cool stories from that. You and your team. So I can't remember. Did you say you were a consultant for Active Valor, or your team was actually shot in that movie?
Well, the reason I bring that up is like we're a very unknown community, even within the Navy, and it's just hard to explain. And since that movie is pretty mainstream, a lot of people have seen it. It's easiest just to say, "Have you seen Active Valor? Do you remember the boat scene?" That's what I do in the Navy. And it kind of just like, all right, I don't have to draw all these analogies and like explain. Yeah. It's just, my team filmed the coastal scene down in Key West with the yacht takedown. And so it was very interesting to see the difference between like Hollywood movie director. Like we spent all day just shooting like one scene over and over and over again. Crazy. Yeah. But they had to use real operators because, unfortunately for Hollywood, I don't think Charlie Sheen and Tom Hanks should be driving a $10 million boat. You know what I mean? No. The risk of that is pretty high. So it was I think the intent of that movie was to boost recruiting. And I'm sure it did that, because it is pretty heart pumping. One of the premises behind that movie is like those individual scenes, the guy diving on the grenade, the guy who got shot 26 times. Those are all real stories that have happened. They just are fictionally portrayed in the movie, but they're based off real events. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah. When you see those scenes, it's just like, dude, it brought me to tears again when he jumped on that grenade. It was just like, oh, I can't imagine like you think you know what you're going to do in that moment, but like, do you really know what you're going to do? And you don't know until it actually happens. And then, you find out, but, I think we'd all like to think we'd jump on that sucker. But,
right.
All right. So let's talk about your career a little bit. I got very interested in it when I was looking at your resume, and one of the things you said on there was stimulating foreign military sales. So, like, when I read that, the first thing I think of is, like, Iron Man and, Robert Downey Jr., like, flying above, military testing facility and showing them basically, you know what I mean? And that's what I'm thinking in my head.
Yeah.
But it's actually a very finesse thing that you used to do. And can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, that line item in particular, looking more in like the sales business world wasn't something that I primarily did at my embassy job, but it became part of it. Part of that approach I was talking to you about, you know, the rule of 10 and like, what can I do for you? And so, you know, we would come in with all kinds of new equipment, boats and guns and stuff like that. And if the host nation was interested and it was legal to, you know, sell them those things, they'd want to buy boats and planes and guns and things like that. And I would just make that connection, you know, like the host nation would say, yeah, we're really interested and we want to buy these boats for our SWAT team. And I'm like, okay, I don't do that, but I know the person at the embassy who does. And then I would introduce them and then they would, you know, they would run with it. But it was just a problem that they wanted to solve. And they came to me to figure out how to do it. And as I'm learning to translate all this experience, you know, like we had our conversation, you know, like you said, that's very business development type, a guy who just kind of knows and just, you know, makes connections and introduces people and makes things happen. And so I threw that in there as maybe it would catch somebody's eye.
Oh yeah. Caught my eye. And then when you told me about it, like I'm walking through, so, you know, one of the abilities that I have in my business is training, and a lot of training is translating, right? And so when I look at, you know, what you did in that model, you know, there's really two major pieces of it. One is lead generation, right? You're going out and in your normal operation, you have an ability to basically prospect for military sales. You're not doing it on purpose. It just happens naturally, right? And then the second piece of that is the relationship building, you know? And when you look at a business development role in anybody that sells anything to the military or to just corporations, that's it right there. It's lead generation and it's relationship building, you know? And so that skill set absolutely translates to the civilian world. And, you know, one of the things I think I told you is just have a lot of confidence in that, you know what I mean? Because who can say they've sold or they have, you know, generated a lead that sold a $10 million boat? You know what I'm saying? Like that, right. And then that they generated leads that created military sales, you know? And so there really isn't a price point that I think you would be afraid of, you know what I'm saying? Whereas like, you know, people that sold home services or something like that, maybe the biggest thing they sold was $5,000, you know? And so, you know, you've basically generated millions of dollars in military sales. And so that's what business development is, 100%. So I think it translates really well. And so you mentioned the rule of 10 earlier, and this is something that you've kind of came across in your career. And so can you walk us through the rule of 10?
Yeah, and that it all kind of ties together, you know, like that for military sales wasn't my job at all, but my access and placement and the relationships, the trust that I had in that job that I built over time is just what made it very turnkey for me that somebody asked about a particular topic. And I'm like, yeah, I know a guy who can do that for you. And I just introduce him. That was one of them. But I developed what I call the rule of 10. Actually, I've taught this, and you know, that tour is still paying me to this day, and good relationships and friendships. But I would tell, you know, you have to understand, for us in the special operations community, or even the military community, we are in an organization that is built to support the warfighter. You know, so if you go to any one of the teams, like all of the departments are there to support whatever that warfighting entity is, a tank battalion, a SEAL platoon, a boat detachment, the fighter squadron, whatever. And so when you get into working in the State Department, diplomatic world, it's a whole different ballgame, because those people don't owe you anything. Like, they can wake up, go through their whole day and not talk to you and be successful. So the only way that you can get things done in that space is to get to build a bond that transcends rank and title, and just get to know them as like Doug and Rob, you know. And the way I approached that was just like, if you always come to somebody with a problem, or if you need something, they eventually get tired of you coming around. And I would have to work with the guys that would come in and be like, look, just go by and say hi. I called them trust deposits, and I say, only if you talk to somebody 10 times, on the 10th time, should you ask them for a favor. And it doesn't have to be this grandiose hour-long chit chat. It can just be as simple as saying good morning, or, bringing a cup of coffee by if they're having a hectic morning and they like lattes, or asking about their daughter's dance recital, or just showing a genuine interest in them. Ask about their cats or their dogs or the Cowboys, whatever. And you do that through what I call trust deposits, just, casual conversations and with no agenda. You have to approach people with no agenda in mind. Just go by and just be a nice person. And then eventually a day will come that you need something from that individual, and they'll be happy to help you out, versus every time they see you, it's because your hair's on fire and you need something. There's some emergency problem. And I explain to guys, like, imagine everybody comes to work each day with a plate of food, and before they go home, they have to eat that whole plate, and it's already got more food than they can eat on it. And so when you walk up, you represent like a triple bacon cheeseburger that you're going to slap onto that plate, that they want to help you out. They're going to have to eat all the stuff they have to eat, plus your triple bacon cheeseburger. And so when I say, like, what can I do for you? My approach is to come around every day and take a few things off that plate for them. Right. Yep. And so that one day I come around to slap the cheeseburger down, they're like, I got you, man. What do you need?
Yeah.
But it takes time to do that. You can't just drop in and do that kind of stuff overnight.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and probably my favorite part of that concept or that philosophy is the trust deposit piece. It makes sense in relationship building that, you have 10 interactions or 10 occurrences before you ask for anything, because you're building that relationship. But then when you talk about trust deposits, that's what that interaction is, right? And when you talk about sales philosophy in general, one of the best sales philosophies is people buy who they know, like, and trust. And so by the time you get to that 10th or that 9th trust deposit, they know, like, and trust you. There's no way around it, especially if you haven't asked for anything from them, And so I love that rule. That's a great rule to live by and to work by, 100%.
It's funny. You had said to me after I explained a lot of this stuff that, like, you said, you understand business better than a lot of people who've been in business, and that made me feel good. It kind of brought my anxiety down a little bit, because I'm going from a comfortable military environment that I've had a paycheck on the 1st and the 15th for 21 years. I haven't had to worry about medical, dental, life insurance, any of that kind of stuff. It's a very comfortable bubble that we live in, and trying to figure out, like, how I'm going to translate that into a civilian sector. And I'm like, well, I know how to do all these things in a military setting, but what does that mean to you? And so to hear you say, dude, you understand business, like, you use different words, and your experiences are different, but the concepts are, like, solid. And the fact that you naturally do that is good. It brought my stress levels down quite a bit.
Yeah.
Hearing you say that.
As you have more conversations with civilian business owners or the civilian business world, I think you're going to find you're highly qualified for what you're about to do, And I think that's kind of the big message I wanted to send to our listeners on this podcast, because we have a lot of sales-centric listeners, right? Huge organizations, solar, roofing, whatever the case may be. And what they're missing in their business is a referral partner generator, is what I like to call them. A relationship builder, like you're talking about, but also that military operator mindset feeds into an integrator role so well. So when you look at EOS, which EOS is a model that a lot of small businesses run on, right? Because there's not this big corporate hierarchy already in place from a Fortune 500 company. And so they pick up a book by Gino Whitman called Traction or Rocket Fuel. And they're like, okay, this is a good platform for me to operate on. Very not similar in strategy, but similar, it's just another platform like, special operations operates on. You have your hierarchy of things that you have to attack, right? And so in that hierarchy is a visionary, which is typically the business owner, and then the integrator, which is like the number 2. and the person that is the best coach on the team. You know what I mean? The one that can kind of, you know, the visionary has all these ideas and the integrator is able to implement them, or once they are implemented them, make sure that they're running smoothly, you know? And a lot of military operators, because of their background and their training, are able to transition into that integrator type role. And I see it all the time in my business. And then I'm sure Brenda sees it all the time through the Honor Foundation. And I know Zach Hughes with the Elite Meet, you know, so he worked for them for the longest time, transitioning special forces into the civilian business world. So that's, you know, one of the things I really want to drive home is if you're having trouble finding that person that can help you out with the operational side of the business, you might need to look at prior military in general, but in particular special operations, because you guys are just trained on how to handle crisis, how to handle expansion, how to handle basically think on your feet, you know, which is a big deal when you're expanding a business, you know. And so it translates so well. And I wanted to make sure we covered that, as well as, you know, extracted some of that, some of those philosophies that you have in your experience and everything. The last thing that I want to talk about is what, you know, so obviously being in special forces and prior military, I'm sure most people put you in this box, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, he's going to be analytical, he's going to be metrics-based, probably not really creative, right? But you actually have been practicing creative writing for a while now. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I went to, well, let me back up a little bit, because I want to like add about what you just said. Okay. Like what you just described in the enforcer, what was that role you described?
Integrator.
It's so natural for us, because that's just how we think, right? Mm-hmm. We have a commanding officer, we have a commander that gives us a vision or an intent, right? A stated intent and an end state. This is my commander's intent. This is my end state, where I want to be, with a timeline. And then once we have that off in the distance, we're like, okay, in order to get to there, we need to, and we build a strategy from right now. Like, what do I need to do this hour, this day, week, month, year to get to that? And then we hold people accountable to those mini milestones along the way. And it's just so natural for us, you know, like you could, I mean, we do it at home, probably drive our families crazy with it, you know, like, oh, we need to go to the Portsmouth Naval Hospital and be there at 10:15. And we just go right into, well, we need to leave by this time to get through the tunnel and parking and traffic and this, you know, so we need to walk out the door no later than boom. And we're just so good at drive. It's so easy for us to do that. And
then if we have a traffic accident in front of us, we have alternate routes planned.
Right. And that's the other thing, is like, once we've figured out the plan, which we'll spend 10% of our mental bandwidth on, because that's the easy part, is figuring out how to make it go right. Then we dive into the contingencies and start figuring out all the things that could potentially go wrong or hinder us from getting to that objective. And then we figure out alternate plans, how to posture to like mitigate or prevent some of these things. And so we just dive into this full spectrum, like, how are we going to get there successfully? And a lot of times when those contingencies start to happen, we blow right through it, because we've already discussed it. We already have an alternate plan in place, and we're just like bump, and everybody just goes. And so I think you take that into like your world, and you just give a guy a goal and a time,
yeah,
and just let him figure it out, you know, like he probably will.
So many integrators in my world, the way that I see them operate is, okay, here's the plan, and they start executing the plan as if nothing is going to go wrong. So they don't put those contingencies in place, and something goes wrong, and then they got to come up with a new plan. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then they along the path over a year, they've got 6 different plans. And it is, as a visionary and an integrator in my business, it gets exhausting, because I don't have the bandwidth to create all these contingencies. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm doing both roles, right? And so that's where the military style integrator comes in and has those contingencies in place and is ready for that type of stuff. So
awesome. Hopefully that hit home with some listeners out there to be like, why are we good at it? And
Yeah.
like what we for you is like, Doug, you're like, hey, Rob, this is where I want to go and when I want to be there. And I'm going to go do some research, and I'm going to come back to you typically with 3 courses of action and say, hey, here's 3 ways to get. So you have control and buy-in in this process, and you get to, we call it steering. You get to steer it, course correct. And you're like, hey, I really like plan B. Let's go with that. And then now we're going to dive into the more details with the pros, the cons, the contingencies, and we're going to keep briefing you along the way. And so you have the ability to kind of adjust the plan, but you're not the one doing all the work, right? Like they're doing 98% of it, and you're just giving little critiques. And so it's a beautiful system. But we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that's incredibly important in the world that we live in is social media. And I expressed this to you in detail, but the beautiful thing about that is you're kind of already doing it without knowing, right? So one of the hardest things to do right now, and one of the most valuable tools that anybody has, is the ability to write copy or write period, right? And so there's literally like businesses that operate this way. So like if I need help, you know, writing solar ads and stuff like that, I can reach out to a copywriting company and they'll write the ads for me, right? There's also AI technology that will do it as well. And so, but beyond that, you know, and kind of going back to your rule of 10, a big strategy in small business right now, and this is how we get past the big companies spending all the ads, whether it's solar, whether it's roofing or home services or security or whatever the case is, right? The way that we get past that is we build social media relationships, right? So when I post on social media, I'm giving value, giving value, giving value. And then when I actually ask for something, it's like a donation to the Movember campaign, or it's, you know, market research for solar, or it's, hey, I'm taking on 3 consulting clients in Q1 of 2023. You know, if you're interested, you know, set up a call with me, whatever the case is. So those are all asks. But those are asks I'm giving after doing 3 podcast episodes a week that people can get value from, posting twice a day, and, you know, letting them in, basically creating familiarity. But it's all writing. You know what I mean? And all a podcast is spoken writing, right? And so it's all writing. Writing is incredibly important right now because it's a unique art, because so many people just want to put the video in front of them and do this. It's become this, like, where video used to be the rare thing that people would do. Now it's like so common. Then when people actually write, they take the time to put a good story together. People take more notice and they appreciate that more, you know? So I know that you've dabbled in some creative writing in the past. What got you into that?
Well, I went to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center I had suffered a traumatic brain injury back in 2019. And I went up there to their TBI ward, and they do creative art as a form of therapy. And I've always just been good with words and poetry, even back, you know, in grade school. And it's funny because in our line of work, like when you leave a command, we'll give you a paddle, and on the front, it'll have like the dates of your service and, you know, some memorabilia and things. But if the people really liked you, if you flip it around to the back, there's a roast, there's like a slam poetry on the back. And it's usually brutal, and it's funny. And like, we'll get together, you know, outside of work, a barbecue or a restaurant or bar or something. And we'll just kind of, it's like a roast, you know, to say goodbye. And I've become the unofficial paddle roast guy everywhere I've been. So it was just kind of natural. But what the first story I wrote was called The Book and the Pen. And my like message to the leaders of the military today is like, these younger servicemen and women, like, to them, 9/11 was something they learned about in history class. Right. You know what I mean? They're 18, 19, 20 years old now. So 9/11 is before they were born. And they don't have this deep-seated conviction to serve and defend their nation like we did. When, you know, I would imagine it's probably the same during Pearl Harbor, right? Yeah. Like people. And so that's dwindling away. right? And at the same time, you've got they're smarter and they're more capable than we were when we joined, right? Mm-hmm. And they're more informed. You know, they can fact check you with their iPhone as you're speaking to them. Yeah. Where when I came in the Navy, if I wanted to fact check my chief, I had to go like to a library and pull out a big Navy pub, and you know, like anybody got time for that, right? You did what chief said because that's the way the military worked, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was it. And nowadays that doesn't work. Like the younger generation wants to ask why. They want to know why. They want to be informed. And so it's like, how do you take an like old school? It's kind of funny that I would say old school, but like older wisdom that I learned and like translate it in a way that they can understand. And then it's like Jennifer Aniston in the breakup with Vince Vaughn when she's like, I want you to want to do the dishes, you know? Yeah. It's like, you know, like for me, when I was a young sailor, I showed up to a meeting. I didn't have a book and a pen, and an old crusty chief shoved one into my chest with some colorful language and told me, don't ever do that again. And that was it. I've never gone to a meeting without a book and a pen, right? Like that's all I needed. But now they're going to say, well, why? You know, yeah. Why? And so the book and the pen was a story about how it forms a key, and that book and that pen is the key to your future, right? Mm-hmm. And the metaphor is that like the book and the pen are just separately two items, right? But when you put them together and you use them, they form a key to a door that is going to open up the first of many doors on your path to success. But you can't open that door, right? The only thing that you can do is make the key, and someone else has to open it for you. And why the book and the pen is important is if you just show up on time in your uniform, shave, have a haircut, you know, the basics, right? Show up, be a good dude, and you have this book and pen and you write everything down and you check it throughout the day, you know, you won't forget to do anything, right? Before you go home, check it, be like, oh, I forgot to do that, do it. And then over time, what happens is your leadership starts to notice that you're dependable, right? They see that you give this presence that you're committed because you're always there with your book and your pen, right? And then you never forget to do anything because the book reminds you not, and you don't forget, right? So then you become dependable. And once they see you as dependable, that's when the trust starts to form. And once they trust you, that's when you've turned the book and the pen into a key, right? And then what happens is an opportunity is going to come along, probably more in the military than in the civilian world, a short notice deployment, a high value school, you know, good orders to Italy or something, mm-hmm. right? And they're going to have to pick somebody to go, and they're going to pick you because they trust you, right? And they're going to take that key that you've made now with the book and the pen. They're going to open up that door and send you through it. And then you're going to show up to the next door. Your reputation is going to arrive before you. Mm-hmm. They're going to assign you bigger and better things to do. You're going to crush them because you know, every day you still have your book and your pen, and then you gain knowledge, you gain experience. But if you trace it all the way back, you know, you're competent. You're confident because you're competent. You're competent because of your knowledge and experiences. You have knowledge and experience because of your opportunities. You were given opportunities because people trusted you. People trusted you because you were dependable. You were seen as dependable because you always had a book and a pen. So at the very core of why you ended up in this position is because you started off. And so my intent is like to give that to the younger generation, whether it's your first day on the job at McDonald's, right out of college, boot camp, whatever. Because people always ask me, like, what's the key to success? You know, you made it high in the enlisted ranks and in the special operations community. And I'm like, well, there's really the answer is not as glamorous as you think it is, right? Just be on time with the right uniform and equipment and have a book and a pen. Like just start with that and everything else will start falling into place, you know? And if you can have a smile, that helps too, right? Yeah. And so there's not this like magical, and that's an issue, you know, it's like the younger, they want everything fast, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I want it now. It's like, no, this is a lifelong commitment, right? And it's going to take time, but if you just do it, like you said in your last podcast I listened to, it's your disciplines, right? This just becomes part of your discipline, and it'll do wonders for you. And so what I've done is I've actually taken the time to write these personal, heartfelt messages on that stained paper I sent and I burned it and made it look old.
Yeah.
And I sit down and I go to the store and I buy a $2 book and a pen, and I give it to them, and I explain what I just explained to you, and I give them this heartfelt message. And now they want to do the dishes, right? Now they understand the value of using it, and they're going to use the book and the pen for the rest of their life, probably. Mm-hmm. But if I just say, you will have a book and a pen because I said so.
Yeah.
Those days are gone, dude.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, old guys. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm talking to my own peer group.
Yeah.
Like, those days are gone because Chief said so, or because I said so. It doesn't work anymore. But if you just take a little bit of time to sit down and get to know people and figure out how you can craft a message in a way they can understand it, whether it's horse racing or football or something that like they're excited about, you'll get buy-in. And once you have that buy-in, that's where you start to build that trust with those people, and they'll go to the end of the earth for you.
I love the message, and there's so many good points I want to take out of that. The first is, every Gen Z person on earth needs to hear that message. You know what I'm saying? Because it does. It speaks to them, because there is a why behind the order or the request, whatever you want to call it. The second
there's
thing,
your why.
Yeah, there's your why. Yeah. The second thing is, man, parents need to hear it, And the first thing I thought of when you said why, when the kids say why, is my son, my middle son. You know what I mean? He's the
why.
Yeah. ADD, misunderstood, always talking back, you know what I'm saying? But when I take the time to explain things to him and then it clicks finally, then he's amazing, right? And so the book and the pen is just a great story that I think I need to remind myself as a parent, hey, I'm going to have to give him that why if I want the best out of him, instead of always just, and I was raised by a military stepdad. So it was, do what I say to do when I say to do it, and that's it. There is no why. There is no, investigation into this.
Yeah.
And so I think that's
very Forrest Gump, right? Because you told me to.
Yeah, exactly. And look, and some people will, and we call them good employees and we call them good salespeople or whatever the case is. They will do it just because you said to do it. You know what I'm saying? But imagine what you can get out of them if they understood why. And so
because you get the buy-in, and that once you have the buy-in, that's where things really change. That's where you become you go from being a boss to a leader, right? That's an important step. It's like anybody can be a boss. It's like, do what I say because I said so. But when you move up to becoming a leader, it's because you get buy-in, and you get buy-in by taking time to talk and invest in people. But in this fast-paced world, people don't want to take the time, and that's unfortunately that's the world we live in, right? Like,
absolutely. So I've got a few more things to cover before we wrap up. But the first thing is everybody talks about supporting the military and backing the military and waving their flag and everything, but very few chances do civilians like myself or business owners get the chance to actually serve our military and for serving us, right? And so this is one of the ways that I think we can, when you have that operator type position or business development, even sales manager or salesperson, really start seeking out those military resumes, because I think you'll find there's gold in them. And if you can align their military training with the position that you have available, then it's going to be deadly for you. It's going to be highly profitable for you, and you'll have an opportunity to give back to our military, which has given us so much. So I just want to make sure that drive that last point home. And then I'm going to put you on the spot, Robert. I ask all my guests this, and if you've only listened to my solo episodes, you don't know about it. But at the end of every episode, I ask them basically, what does legacy mean to you, and what legacy do you want to leave behind?
the legacy that I want to leave behind is somebody who just help people get to where they, no matter what your goal was, whether it's get your bachelor's degree or join the military, whatever, just like help you get to whatever that next level is. And I think to me, the legacy are those people, right? Like that's those people when your name comes up, in a gym or a coffee shop or whatever, and they're like, man, that guy was awesome. He stopped what he was doing. I have people thank me all the time, and like, I wouldn't have got my, boat captain qual if it wasn't for you pushing me and helping me. And, that's the legacy I want to leave behind. And to me, legacy is like what people say about you after you're gone, whether that's after you walk out the gate, you leave the job or you pass away or whatever, but it's like the stuff that people will say about you after you're gone.
I love it. And I think a lot of yours will come from that creative writing piece, whether you know it or not, whether it's the rule of 10, the trust deposits, or the book and the pen. The book and the pen is just an amazing story that I think needs to be heard everywhere. And so I'm incredibly grateful that you came on the podcast today. You're always nervous when you start a podcast as a host, whether or not you're going to be able to actually like exemplify who you're bringing on and the knowledge that they have and do them justice and everything. But I think we have today. And, part of that is because you're a great communicator. So I feel like we were able to accomplish that today. So I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, Doug. And, you talked about like what can guide. You were the first person that I was introduced to through this Honor Foundation. You start like this and they kind of dial you in. You were the first person that like no military background, just, Brenda saw a good link up. And so like really kind of coming in cold, you took the call, you listened to what I had to say, and you gave me some good advice. And then you opened up your Rolodex and introduced me to Harry. And that's going well. Right. And I could tell you that if I was standing on a ledge with 1 foot off, nervous about making this leap into the civilian world, I probably took like 5 steps back that day from the edge. My anxiety levels, my worry, my stress, I felt like this overwhelming, like I'm going to be okay. And so like, what can the people in your line of work do is just take the call. Like, and it may not be in solar panels, right? But it may light bulb go off. You're like, hey, talk to my friend Christy or Jimmy or whoever, and just help these people find employment. It's huge, man. And I can't thank you enough for doing this. The call we had before, the connection with Harry, it's all awesome, man. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And we'll, hopefully we can get that hashtag trending too. Take the call.
Take the call, right?
I did the post the other day that take the call, but whenever we put all this stuff out, we'll be sure to include that hashtag as well. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's serving me just as much as it's serving you, being able to give back to the military like that. And it's just a phone call. Like I probably do 10 of them a day. You know what I mean? So if you can have one that makes an impact like this, I mean, honestly, it's almost selfish. You know what I'm saying? It really is self-serving at that point.
It's part of your legacy, you know? Like your legacy will live on through me. Like I'll say your name for the rest of my life. Like this guy, Doug, you know, and that adds to your legacy.
Absolutely, brother. Well, again, I appreciate you coming on the show. It was an honor having you on the show, and look forward to seeing what you do from here.
All right, man. Thanks, Doug. Have a good one.
All right, let's get building.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Building Great Sales Teams. Be sure to execute on what you just heard, and let's get building. As always, remember to subscribe and leave a review wherever you consume podcasts. You can also head on over to buildinggreatsalesteams.com and sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date with everything that's going on with the podcast. See you next time.